Tonight, a memorial ride in honor of an international student killed while riding his bike in a busy intersection.
Every life is sacred. Every life should count.
Hundreds of cyclists come together to honor the life of Kartik Saini, the 20-year-old student from India who died after being struck and dragged by a motorist last week. Plus,
could money have been spent better at a lower cost, potentially?
Wasted COVID-19 vaccine doses, a disorganized rollout, and large pay discrepancies between those giving the vaccines. Just some of the main findings in the latest report from the Ontario's Auditor General. And
we were able to identify 22 victims during Project Maverick.
Toronto police identified nearly 24 victims of online child exploitation and just as many suspects as part of a massive province-wide investigation dubbed Project Maverick. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Hundreds of cyclists took to the road tonight for a memorial ride honoring the life of a 20-year-old international student killed in a collision last week. Kartik Saini died after being struck by a vehicle making a prohibited right turn at a busy intersection of Yonge and St. Clair. Dale Manukduk has this story.
And was struck a week ago tonight in this location.
Flashing bike headlights lit up Bloor Street. Hundreds of cyclists riding for 20-year-old Kartik Saini.
The younger, the worse, honestly. But again, every life is sacred. Every life should count.
The 20-year-old international student from India was struck and killed last Wednesday. Police say it happened around 4:30 when the driver of a truck made a right turn, colliding with Saini, ultimately dragging him and his bike lodged underneath the vehicle. Right turns at the intersection are prohibited between 4 and 6 p.m.
I was really hoping that the city of Toronto could have its first year without an actual fatality on bike, but I guess we're not. The vision isn't there yet.
Saini's death making an impact here in Toronto, while home in India, where his extended family is grieving. They describe him as a hardworking, focused young man.
He was the youngest one, so that's why it's a very painful and heartbreaking for us. The youngest one has left us so early.
The family is trying to bring his body home to give him a proper burial.
We have got the death certificate now. Now the things are like the tickets are pending. Once we do with the tickets, we'll go to the Consulate General of India in Toronto.
No rider rides alone.
The memorial ride started at Bloor Street and Spadina, ending at the location of the collision. It was an emotional night for some in attendance.
This is one death in a series of deaths of young Indian men who are international students who have passed away in the city. I'm thinking of a young man who in the spring was murdered outside of Sherbourne Station.
Toronto police are still investigating Saini's death. No arrest has been made. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Peel Regional Police officially launching the festive ride campaign today in an effort to prevent impaired driving.
One of the many benefits of the RIDE program is its notoriety among residents. It signals drivers to think before getting behind the wheel this holiday season, reminding them to separate their drinking and their drug use from driving. It's also proven to curtail potential impaired drivers from engaging in this very life-threatening behavior. Both Park and the Peel Regional Police instinctively acknowledge that deterrence and punishment alone will not solve the issue of impaired driving. And through our collective action, we'll have a much better chance at making a meaningful difference in the people who struggle with substance use.
The RIDE campaign is a year-round commitment to prevent impaired driving through awareness and roadside stops. Now, during the holiday season, there are additional officers and increased enforcement. Police are encouraging people to plan responsibly when attending parties or events, whether it's taking public transit, calling an Uber, or having a designated driver. Now, if you spot a suspected impaired driver, you should call 911. A man has life-threatening injuries tonight after a shooting downtown. Now, it happened at around 8:45 at a building near King Street West and Shaw Street. A man was found at the scene suffering from gunshot wounds. Now, he was rushed to hospital in critical condition. There's no word yet on a suspect. The province's Auditor General says Ontario wasted nearly 3.5 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, while one private company doing vaccinations threw out more doses than it put into arms. Now, the disorganized vaccine rollout, just one of 15 areas the AG focused on in her annual report. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redicop takes a closer look.
Ontario's Auditor General found that from February to June of this year, 38% of COVID vaccines were wasted, as demand for boosters was less than expected. Overall wastage during the pandemic was at 9%.
There was a pandemic, and money had to be spent. And could money have been spent better at a lower cost, potentially?
She found one private company doing vaccinations, Switch Health, threw out 57% of its vaccines. Another, FH Health, wasted 20%.
Shows a government which had 8 months to prepare was clearly unprepared for the rollout.
She also pointed to the pay discrepancy between those giving vaccines, up to $220 an hour for doctors versus less than $50 an hour for nurses, and up to $57 an hour for pharmacists.
Why did the government decide that we would pay other health professionals 5 times what we've paid those nurses to do the exact same work? I don't know.
This Liberal MP worked as a doctor during the pandemic and blames the province being disorganized.
They had to ask doctors to step away from their work in emergency departments, in intensive care units. And so in order to do that, they had to compensate them not for the cost, but for the opportunity cost.
The health minister says it was about getting anyone who could help on board.
We wanted to, in a very quick way, make sure that we had all of those pathways operating when we received sufficient vaccines.
The auditor also looked at the province's plans for building highways, finding that the government overrode experts within the transportation ministry who did not recommend prioritizing Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass.
There was an override of those decisions, but that's okay. I think the thing is, though, there should always be transparent reporting.
The auditor says the province hasn't paid enough attention to urban flooding. She gives the example of a record-breaking Toronto rainfall in 2013, Ontario's priciest disaster ever, with 7,000 flooded basements and $1 billion in insurance claims. She recommends requiring a backwater valve for new builds, costing around $250.
If it's cheaper to put it in construction, we're just not sure why the building code hasn't been updated to be very direct about that.
The government says it will review the most recent building code changes and consult with building officials. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
Some of the unions behind the successful court challenge to overturn legislation capping public sector wage increases had a message for the Premier today.
Ontario's nurses and healthcare professionals are demanding that the Premier Ford and his government accepts the court's decision and does not appeal.
Now is the time to think very hard about your next step. Now is not the time for appeal. Now is the time for redress. Read the room.
The Ford government indicating it does plan to appeal yesterday's ruling striking down Bill 124. Passed in 2019, the legislation limited wage increases for hundreds of thousands of public sector workers in the province. A number of labor organizations banded together to challenge the constitutionality of the law. The justice who made the ruling said the law infringes on the applicant's rights to freedom of association and collective bargaining. Well, some people walking around the Humber River earlier this week spotted something unusual floating in the water. The city tells us that's oil. It's just one of many incidents of oil and chemical spills that have happened over decades in the Humber. And some people in the area are concerned the city is not doing enough to raise awareness about it.
Doesn't seem like there's been a whole lot done so far to stop, the flow of oil. So I think it's really crucial to act quickly to, stop that leak and also raise awareness about issues like this, because this is actually not, the first time that this has happened.
The city says staff investigated the incident and traced the spill back to a business in the area that manufactures small metal car parts. Staff contained it and used a hydro vacuum truck to clean the stream. The cleanup efforts will continue tomorrow. All right, let's go to Colette Kennedy now with a first check on your forecast. And Colette, a very blustery day, winds still going quite strong tonight.
Yeah, we're still looking at strong winds, not as drastic or dramatic as they were earlier, but we'll have strong winds tonight, tomorrow for the first part of the day. Then they'll be backing off. And the other story, of course, were the temperature changes as the colder air was moving in. At 6 a.m., there were still double digits in southwestern Ontario. We were still working on warming up in Toronto, but then things started to seesaw and turn the other direction. So by 10 a.m., it was down to 3 degrees in Windsor. And watch the dark green there pushing across, basically following the front along, or the changing winds behind as that colder air moved in, and all of us moving into the cooler air by the time we got into the evening hours. Now, the other thing about these winds, not only where we've had the special weather statement and wind warnings, but also driving some snow squalls. So snow squall warnings in place, and in the warning areas, the potential for 10 to even exceeding 20 centimeters of snow, but also it's the reduced visibility and just how tricky that can be. For the city tonight, -2 with a few of those flurries, a dusting still possible here. Tomorrow afternoon, less with the winds, a little more with the sunshine, and our high going up to 3 degrees, Kelvin.
Thanks so much, Colette. Hundreds of charges have been laid and more than 100 people arrested across the province as part of a massive investigation into online child exploitation dubbed Project Maverick. And many of the victims and suspects were located right here in Toronto. Greg Ross has more on the operation and the arrests.
It was a collaboration of 27 police organizations, including Toronto Police and the OPP. Project Maverick targeted people across the province who used the internet to sexually exploit children.
A total of 428 charges were laid against 107 people as part of this project.
Toronto Police were responsible for arresting 23 of the suspects, who are now facing nearly 100 charges.
These offenses include the possession, accessing, importing, distribution, and the making of child pornography.
Toronto Police also identified 22 victims as part of the investigation, and they say they were able to safeguard 10 other children who were at risk of sexual exploitation or abuse.
Our investigators seized 131 devices containing horrific images and videos of child sexual abuse material.
In one instance, police here collaborated with international partners to track down a suspect on the dark web who they say was planning on kidnapping and abusing young children.
TPS and OPP members investigated the information and were able to identify the accused and his location. A team consisting of both TPS and OPP investigators traveled to a remote northern Ontario town, executed 2 search warrants, and made an arrest.
Police say it's important for parents to have an open line of communication with their children, so they feel safe to come to them if they're in trouble. They also say parents must maintain some control over all of their kids' electronic devices.
The children shouldn't have the devices in their bedrooms. They shouldn't have them in the washroom. There should be some sort of supervision, if possible, with the devices, and perhaps at night those devices are taken from the kids and locked up overnight.
Since this provincial strategy began in 2006, nearly 2,500 charges have been laid and nearly 3,500 victims identified. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Flu cases are up and are expected to continue to climb as we head into the holidays. And that has health experts reminding you to get a flu shot this season. Ali Chiasson has more.
When you hear news about positivity rates, you typically think COVID, right? Well, this time our health authorities are talking about the flu.
Influenza positivity rate is high, and it has gone up week over week. So 2 weeks ago, the influenza positivity rate was just a little over 8%. And then last week, it hit about 10.5%.
It's expected to peak in 4 to 6 weeks from now, smack dab in the middle of the holidays.
So that's why it's really important for people to take advantage of the protective benefit of flu vaccine right now.
So you've had the flu shot before?
I have.
Okay, how did it go last time?
Perfectly fine, just like my COVID shots and boosters.
If I'm going to interview a pharmacist about the flu shot, might as well roll up my sleeve while I'm here.
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect, thank you so
You're
much.
good to go.
Awesome, great. So I noticed lots of people coming in, and I overheard people saying, hey, I'm here for my shot. That's encouraging, right?
You know what, I wasn't sure what to expect this year. I thought there'd be a little bit of fatigue because we've had so much of the news about vaccination and COVID and everything else, but the uptake has been pretty great. We're expecting a kind of a big flu season this year, and I think it's already started. So what we want to do is get people vaccinated as early as possible.
And since it's safe to get a COVID vaccine at the same time, some pharmacists are asking customers if they want a 2-for-1.
We're trying to do a lot of that now. It saves an extra trip, so we do flu shot in one arm, booster in the other, and we get you out pretty fast.
While the availability of children's cold and flu medication fluctuates and our hospitals are brimming with patients, Toronto's medical officer of health is urging people to get up to date with their vaccines, including the flu shot.
The more we're able to protect ourselves, the more we're able to actually avoid the more severe complications associated with influenza infections, including hospitalizations, the better we're able to together protect our healthcare system so it's available for all of us, whether it's for respiratory illness or for all the other reasons that one might need to use the hospital, heart attacks, strokes, all the reasons why people might actually need a hospital.
You can call ahead to book a flu shot appointment, but many pharmacies are taking walk-ins. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning to some sports news now, the Toronto Blue Jays have hired Don Mattingly to serve as bench coach under manager John Schneider.
I really didn't plan when the season ended. I didn't really think I'd be doing anything come into the next season. But the first conversation with Ross was really interesting. And, you know, his beliefs, I could tell the way he was talking and the belief in the club and what he felt like I could bring to the table. That was really interesting to me.
Mattingly spent the last 7 seasons as manager of the Miami Marlins. He announced in September that he would not seek a new contract with the team. Mattingly won 3 division titles and was named National League Manager of the Year in 2020. He looks to help the Blue Jays bounce back from their Wild Card Series loss last season. The Jays blew an 8-1 lead and were eliminated in Game 2. Team Canada plays its final game of the World Cup tomorrow against Morocco, and coach John Herdman says his side hoping to deliver another big moment.
We'll stay committed to our identity and we'll go into this match with an opportunity to make some more history. We've took some big steps together. We've been enjoying the ride the last couple of days. We know there's not long left, and the players are excited to go and play for their families, for the fans in the stadium, and to try and have one of those moments.
Of course, Herdman is referring to more big moments like this one, Alphonso Davies and that lightning strike of a goal against Croatia on Sunday. The first goal for a Canadian men's team at a World Cup. And you are looking at a live shot of the Toronto skyline, mostly cloudy tonight with some flurries overnight. Currently, it is sitting at 0, but feeling more like -8 in the city. Let's go back to Colette now with a look at your extended forecast. And Colette, things will start calming down a bit as we get into the latter part of tomorrow.
Yeah, it will be really nice to feel that. And we're looking at the winds still kind of moderate to strong early in the day. And then by early afternoon, yeah, those winds will be easing on us. But for now, they're certainly gusty and carrying on for the first part of the day tomorrow. Plus, they're driving the snow squalls and even some blowing snow issues, as I was showing you a little earlier in the show. And a repeat on Saturday, yeah, the reason I put that in there is not only are we seeing like the drastic up and downs of a day, like the weather for one day, but for this week. And we may repeat this into Saturday where we're mild with some rain, and then the temperature falling as the day wears on, much like today. So we'll be watching, and I'll be keeping you forecast and up to date on that. The winds, though, just kind of watching, and they're more westerly here than southwesterly, but kind of they're dropping back and improving for us. But in the meantime, they are driving some wind chills as well. So a really chilly night tonight, even though we just fall a little bit into the negatives, it's going to feel like about -10 in many cases. Here we are by tomorrow as we're getting towards mid-morning. Still then, we're looking at some snow squalls coming off of Georgian Bay around the Bruce Peninsula and the lees of Lake Huron. But then by 2 p.m., see how things are really just dropping off, and we're getting more and more sunshine mixing in there with the cloud deck. So that'll be nice, although quite a bit of cloud kind of rolls back in for us on Friday. There will be some breaks, though, in here in times 2. So your temperatures, again, even in southwestern Ontario, although they're not that low, it's just the winds factored in there, and you put those together, and we get that wind chill near -10. Again, same story here all around the Golden Horseshoe. Those wind gusts, though, I mean, today we were talking about wind gusts up to 80 to 90, and tonight, and so that will be an improvement when they're just gusting to 50. Now, Friday, we start to move up again with the thermometer 7 degrees, and into Saturday, 9, but that arrow there for a reason that likely, we'll watch the timing on this, I will for you, but that'll come early in the day, and then the temperature will actually be falling into the afternoon with that wet weather.
Thanks. Osgoode Hall Law School and the TDSB have partnered to create a high school program that breaks down barriers for Black youth.
When I was growing up, I wish there were more programs like this. I think oftentimes when I would tell teachers or educators that I was interested in the legal industry, oftentimes there was a little chuckle or a giggle. And I think for me, it's been so exciting to see Raise the Black Bar come into fruition and get such great support from Osgoode.
Raise the Black Bar was initiated by the Osgoode chapter of the Black Law Students Association. The goal is to bridge the gap in access to university education and create more career opportunities in law for Black students. The program was launched today and is open to all Black students attending TDSB schools, with a focus on those in grades 10, 11, and 12. Finally tonight, Movember No More. Paramedics are saying goodbye to their mustaches today.
The 16th annual Movember campaign here in Canada. We're very humbled to be working with our paramedic colleagues to close down the month and do some shave downs on November 30th. And we've had a great campaign this year. We've had almost 60,000 Canadians join in. We're approaching our numbers from last year, and we hope to raise over $20 million for men's health.
Toronto paramedics were joined by those across the GTA, including Peel and York, all taking part in a shave down to mark the end of Movember. More than $25,000 were raised. Over the last 4 weeks, more than 55,000 Canadians participated in Movember, raising funds and awareness for men's mental health and suicide prevention, prostate cancer, and testicular cancer. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Maribel Tarouk has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.